If you want to be a billionaire, you gotta get the mindset right.
Hello everyone, apologies to just splash our Sarkar on you with her really cringe American accent, but the quicker you get exposed to it, the quicker you get acclimatised to it, because today we are going to tell her why she is wrong in pretty much every sentence she says. Although technically with this sarcastic American voice part that's really cringe, she is technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Hustle.
Life is this. I like this.
Discipline.
Then I apply an herb mint facial mask.
Well, this is technically correct, Ash, because the two things that correlate the most strongly with success are IQ and also conscientiousness. Which basically means if you are disciplined and have good hustle, yeah, you are probably going to end up being quite successful. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean billionaire, but it does mean that you're probably going to be somewhere in the middle class or above. And pretty much every billionaire will be conscientious in some way and also rather intelligent, no matter what you think of Donald J. Trump.
Vision.
We're going to reinvent the phone.
A rise and grind attitude.
Wake up.
And total delusion.
I mean, she was nearly there. Again, those other two things are technically true. But I think one of the main things you need to throw in there is also luck. You have to be quite lucky to end up being a billionaire, since most of them earn them through investments or creating a company that happens to skyrocket, whether they expected it or not. And obviously there's an awful lot of uncertainty in a market where they are going to be growing their business, so therefore they have to get quite lucky with the risk they have put in, and they will pretty much have all the risk because they will own all the assets. Which is, as Ash will go to without understanding, that's where they get most of their money from. Anyway, back to you, Ash.
You're never going to become a billionaire.
No, probably not, and I don't know why you've got such a smug face on while you say that. Because most people realise they're never going to be a billionaire. They probably realise that from the fact that 0.01% of the world population are billionaires, and it's very hard to get into that club.
And here's why. First of all, a billion is a hell of a lot more than a million.
Yes, the difference between a billionaire and a millionaire is indeed around $1 billion. I can't believe we have to go to such basic means to explain why we're never going to be a billionaire, but I'll let it continue.
And I know that sounds obvious, but it's actually kind of wild how much more than a billion actually is.
Honestly, I'm tempted to skip this bit just because it's such a small brain take to say $1 billion is a lot more than a million. Yeah, I know. But I'm going to keep it on because, really, Ash Sarkar and Navarra Media are the face of millennial socialism, which, as I have gone through in videos before, is quite a popular position when it comes to my generation. And I think it's important to go through because ultimately they are going to be the people in charge soon. So I think it's good to, one, laugh at them for making such ridiculously obvious statements. I mean, this is really the sky is blue stuff here, so it's worth pointing and laughing at them for that. But also I think we need to realise how basic Navarra Media has to go for their audience.
Put it this way. If you got £1 every 10 seconds and didn't get taxed on any of it or have any living costs, you'd be a millionaire within 4 months.
I'm also cutting out their stupid little clips like that. They don't add anything, they're just trying to make it look cool. Which I think they try and do because they have absolutely no substance to what they're saying here. Because obviously all she's going to do here is say, right, multiply that 4 months by 1,000 and that's how long it takes to be a billionaire.
But if you got £1 every 10 seconds, you'd have to wait 310 years before you hit your first billion.
Well done, Ash. It's good to see that you can do basic maths. But yes, anyone who's done up to GCSE maths knows this basic concept of very big numbers are much, much bigger than big numbers. I don't know why this would be shocking to anyone, but apparently it is.
So you could have been on a 650 grand salary since the age of 18, which, just FYI, would put you in the top 0.1% of earners, and still not have anything close to $1 billion in your bank account by the time you retire.
Yes, and this obviously puts in the framework of what exactly Ash Sarkar thinks is a fair economy. Basically, the only fair money you can ever have is from a salary or wage, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because people make investments, people make money off their hobby like I do from YouTube. People invest in a property. They'll buy a property for cheap, do it up, increase its worth, whether that's through renovating the place or just keeping it while the house prices are going through the roof thanks to one reason or another. People don't just make money through wages, that's just how most people earn their living, and that's fine. Billionaires, as you said at the start, Ash, have a bit of a hustle, work hard, and make smart investments. You can do that too. Unless you're trying to buy GameStop's shares, of course, but obviously government gets in the way of people making money. But you're going to mention that too, aren't you, Ash?
Billionaires don't earn money the way you or I do. If you were relying on wages to make you a billionaire, you'd literally die before you ever saw it happen.
Oh, so it appears that she does understand how they earn money. I'm just trying to understand why in any way this is bad. What have they actually done wrong, Ash?
So how do people get to become billionaires? Entrepreneurialism, sound investment, and a can-do spirit, right?
Yeah, more or less. I think you have to realise as well, Ash, is that most billionaires will tell you just how many times they failed to get to the place where they are now.
Right? According to Forbes, 69.5% of the billionaires on their 400 list are self-made.
And I can assume from that that basically means the majority of billionaires didn't get it through inheritance and invested their own money, whether it was money they earned or whether it was from loans. Cool, that's fine. That sounds like majority of them earned it, rather than their parents earning it and allowing their children to inherit it.
They cite Oprah Winfrey and the private equity tycoon Barry Sternlicht as examples of people who were born into working class families who overcame significant obstacles in order to get where they are today.
Good, cool, that sounds perfect. I want more people like that. Because odds are, they're providing a very decent service, or investing in very decent services, that allow them to make that much money.
Pretty inspiring, but fundamentally misleading. Forbes might claim that nearly 70% of its top 400 billionaires are self-made, but most of them aren't exactly Jenny from the block.
I don't know or care who that is. But just because Forbes doesn't have the same definition of working class as you, Ash, is something I really don't care about. You probably consider yourself working class, and it's the furthest thing from the truth.
308 of Forbes' top 400 come from middle or upper class backgrounds, or they inherited a business or fortune from their parents, or they're just a hired/hands-off investor who didn't actually grow the business themselves.
Which still implies that about 100 didn't have any of those three criteria you arbitrarily put in, which is still a quarter of them that are considered quote-unquote good billionaires to you, I assume, though I don't think you can ever think there is such thing as a good billionaire. And also, I don't think Ash is going to put out the statistic where most inherited billionaires lose all their money within their generation or the next. So our billionaire class is constantly rotating. And for God's sake, most of them are self-made, as Forbes says. What is your issue here?
The self-made myth falls apart the closer you look at it.
Can't wait to be explained about economics by a communist.
One study from 2012 showed that 40% of American billionaires inherited a sizable asset from a spouse or family member.
Well, let's be fair here, Ash. That's pretty close to the 69.5% of self-made billionaires that Forbes worked out. That's still literally saying that majority of billionaires are self-made. So no, it doesn't fall apart. It's actually pretty consistent in terms of statistics.
And according to Oxfam, about a third of global billionaire wealth comes from inheritance, and another third comes from crony connections to government and monopoly.
Okay, well, first things first, a third is less than 40%, and again is still consistent with the self-made thing. And yes, I'm not surprised that majority of billionaires earn their money from monopoly and government connections, because they're in the way of them making money. That's what happens when you have a big old centralised government. Of course people are going to bribe and try and be crony about it. There wouldn't be any need for that if you didn't have the government in the way. And we're not just talking about basic breaking laws and things like that and turning a blind eye to poor work conditions, though that is an issue that we'll get into later. There will be tax evasion and stuff like that, stuff I don't really care about because I don't think taxation is fair at the moment. And I doubt Oxfam is going to say that the antitrust legislation that just enforces monopolies and the minimum wage which just enforces monopolies is going to be part of the issue here, despite the fact they are. What these people want is a big old government telling everyone what to do, but they can't see that that is literally the issue we have at the moment. Anyway, go on, Ash.
They're the beneficiaries of a rigged system stacked in favour of those who already have a degree of money and power.
Yes, and you want a bigger state. The mind boggles.
But what about, like, investments and stuff?
I love how Ash is making out that someone like me would say something like that. When I have, instead of saying, what about investments, Ash, I say, no, it is investments that get them money, along with government bonds and other loans that they eventually do have to pay back, don't get me wrong, but who are you going to give bonds and loans to? People who can pay it back. Who can pay it back? Billionaires.
Can you tell that I did arts and humanities at uni?
I'd be pretty embarrassed making a video about this, getting everything wrong, not understanding statistics or economics, and then making that joke. Amazing.
As Grace Blakely points out, the single greatest source of wealth on the Sunday Times rich list is property.
I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here and not only say, one, yes, obviously it's going to be property, you idiot, but also point out that they are quoting Grace Blakely. Now, I just want to explain how Grace Blakely has to be one of the worst journalists for economics that you can choose. So as you can see from this picture, Grace Blakely used to work for Vice, or she has at least been a contributor to Vice, since about 2018, where she wrote one article, and then she wrote 4 more in 2020, with quite a bit of a break between her last one and her penultimate one. Now, the thing is, Grace Blakely was advertised as the economics correspondent for Vice magazine, and these are all the articles that she has done. And one of the main reasons I think she only lasted about a month, if that, is because of this bottom left article. Less money, more problems. I'm swimming in debt even though I have a job. Let's take a quick look at it. So this article is essentially a type of agony aunt thing, where some randomer here called Jack has written in saying that he is in thousands of pounds of debt. He has to pay off taxes, which is setting back his ability to pay off the loans and credit card debt. And he's quite annoyed that he has to make so many sacrifices being so young, because he probably has to pay rent too. But he specifically asks in the second paragraph what he can do about his debt. Can he spread out his debt? Can he get other loans? Are there better deals for getting his debt? Because he's tried to look into it all and he finds it a bit overwhelming. So he's gone to an economics contributor who you would think knows something about this. And after spending literally paragraphs blaming the government for austerity after the 2007 crash and explaining how kids today are going to be worse off than their parents for the first time since 1881 or something, this was her direct advice. In the short term, you can speak to Citizens Advice, who provide support in dealing with problem debts, but long term, the only sustainable way to reduce any debt burden, whether public or private, is to increase incomes. That's why austerity didn't work, and it's why you're struggling so much now. You're not doing anything wrong, you're just in an impossible situation. And then she finishes off with this paragraph. The powerful want working people to feel powerless in the face of a system that treats them as though they are only worth as much as their next paycheck. Can't pay your debts? Try being less lazy. You literally just said in 2 paragraphs ago, Grace, that he needs to increase his income. Are you actually retarded? But they know as well as we do that no amount of extra work or saving can change the way the system works. Only by coming together, realising our collective power, and demanding change can we fix our broken economy. The most important thing to take from this experience is that you're not alone and that things do not have to be this way. So basically, her advice here is vote Labour and join a union. Absolutely nothing about how to help his debt, absolutely no knowledge of economics, just basic bitch millennial socialism. We need to change the system because some dude's in debt. And I feel bad for the guy. You don't want to be in debt, and the guy's clearly suffering from it. But my God, the guy's come out for advice on his personal finance, not to be told vote Labour retard. So since she only had one of these columns on Vice and hasn't done one since, that is how bad her advice was. Vice literally didn't want her back. Anyway, Ash, we were talking about property and how billionaires make their money from property. Please explain how they make their money.
But most property wealth doesn't even come from building things. It's through speculation.
Again, this is the type of economics that should just be taught in schools. This is the most basic stuff about economics. Yes, wealth doesn't mean a big Scrooge McDuck vault full of gold that they can swim in. It means they own assets, and the reason they are worth so much is because people either want to buy them because there is demand for the assets, such as stocks, shares, or property, and they are liquid assets, i.e. they can be sold quite quickly for their money. Although property isn't actually a liquid asset because it can take literally months after the sale of the asset before you actually see a single dollar of that money. Anyway, I state the obvious to me.
buying up the housing stock and sitting on it as the prices skyrocket.
I mean, yeah, we have a bit of this issue in London, I'll say. But that's not really coming from billionaires in America or anything like that. That's coming from the Chinese and Russians. And there aren't many of them on the billionaires list. So you're aiming at the wrong target there, Ash.
This doesn't create jobs or trickle down. It pushes up housing costs for everyone else.
I don't think anyone who makes the trickle-down argument makes the claim that owning assets will trickle down the money. The whole idea of that is the entrepreneurial class doing that because they'll eventually need workers to be paid a wage to do whatever it is the business is doing. Obviously, only property doesn't do that, but you're not really explaining what the problem here is outside of supply and demand. But if we're looking at this realistically, when you say they're buying up all the property, it's not really in the poor areas where they're doing this, Ash, is it? It's in the higher ends of London, say Notting Hill, places like that. Places where, the expensive properties are. And yeah, they don't live in them. And quite a lot of them they don't even rent out. But again, I can't see the immorality of this, because the way around this is, well, two ways basically. Either one, you reduce the demand of the housing market, which for Britain and America, the main way you're going to do that is by reducing immigration. Because not only do the immigrants come over and want part of that housing or property, but they're also going to have, more than likely, more kids than the native population. And they are also going to want houses in about a decade's time, maybe more. And that's a problem we're running into right now, since mass migration started in the 90s, thank you Tony Blair. And another thing you can do is increase the supply of housing. But I'm not getting into that because I know I have a few NIMBYs in my audience.
This then creates even more wealth for the already wealthy.
Until you run into a market crash, which is part of the issue, prices don't only go up, Ash. And part of the problem with the housing market is, well, the two things I mentioned. Plus, it's a total bubble. The only reason these assets are worth so much is because people want to buy them. But as soon as there's another asset that's more worth putting their money into, they'll put their money into that instead. That could be space mining for all I know. And then you'll slowly watch house prices go down. But you'll especially see this effect in the higher end houses that basically no one you actually care about can afford. So what's the issue?
The rental market basically transfers money from people who don't own stuff to people who do.
I mean, this is such a stupid thing to say. All trade can be deemed as that. It's a mutual and consensual trade. I'm happy to pay so much a month for this accommodation. Thank you, person who owns the house. I will have that. You can literally just do this with a supermarket and food. Hello, Sainsbury's. I don't have this food that you have. I'm going to pay you for it. Oh, look at that. Someone who owns something now gets my money. And now I own the thing that I came for. And the irony of a communist saying this. I can tell you did humanities because you definitely didn't do the history of the USSR or anything like that. Anyway, Ash, please tell me how the economy works.
Property portfolios aren't a productive investment, they're a predatory one.
God, I'd love to know what your answer is to this. But you're literally here just to bitch out billionaires, which I find hilarious. Because all millennial socialism gets told is that it's the politics of envy. And this is literally a 6-minute video of Ash going, oh my god, people are earning money. Or making money, or whatever. Through means that so far, I have had no issue with.
And property developers don't become billionaires by building affordable housing. The richest ones make their money by building ugly-ass luxury developments and selling them to other billionaires.
Yeah, so I think it should be easier to build the affordable housing than it is to build the, as you put, ugly-ass billionaire houses. Though I'm not going to lie, Ash, I think if you were living in one of these ugly-ass houses, or mansions, or whatever you want to call them, you would not be calling it ugly-ass. Because at the end of the day, Ash, you are incredibly vain, and if you had the wealth, you would be absolutely showing it off. As you always do on Twitter.
Who in turn sell them to other billionaires, who sell them to other... You get the idea.
Wow, I can't believe that billionaires trade their billionaire mansions to other billionaires. It's like what that is. It's almost like that's what the market for billionaire mansions is for, Ash.
Billionaire wealth is built on exploitation.
I am yet to see any evidence from you, Ash. Because all we've had so far is, if they're not self-made, they inherit it. But most of them so far seem to be self-made, so go on. How are the majority of billionaires awful people?
This can be through monopolising a resource that we all need to survive, like energy, steel, or information.
Whoa, wait, what? The energy companies are not monopolised. We do not have an energy monopoly anywhere that I can think of. In Britain alone, I can name off some off the top of my head. EDF Energy, Scottish Power, British Gas, N Power, I'm sure there's more. Oh, SSE, yeah. There's loads of energy companies. That's not monopolised, you idiot. And also, monopolised steel? Who buys steel? That's a secondary product. That's usually turned into tertiary products. And I obviously don't know steel companies off the top of my head because I've never had to directly look at what steel companies we have. And finally, monopoly on information? It was a monopoly on information. If you talk about the internet, there's more search engines than just Google. There's more websites than just Google Scholar. The issue with information, if that's what you're after, that's not an issue at all. And paying for the internet is only getting cheaper the more we talk about it. Fibre optics are being put in everywhere. It's so cheap to get information nowadays. I don't know what you're talking about, Ash.
And putting up barriers so we can only access it through them.
Yes, I agree. Antitrust laws are awful. But this is the thing, I don't really blame billionaires for trying to go through crony capitalist means or try and create monopolies through the government, because I don't see why the government should have that power anyway. The issue here, as usual for this channel, is government and government power being overreaching. But Ash doesn't see it that way. Ash sees it as the government that literally made these monopolies and oligarchies, of which you can barely even actually name any, wants them cracked down on by them. Why would they do that? Why would they just not incorporate the monetary power from them instead, Ash? Think about these things.
Or it can be creating miserable conditions for workers so that owners can maximise profit.
Finally, Ash may have a decent point.
Think about those self-made, one great idea billionaires. Steve Jobs or Tim Cook of Apple, Jeff Bezos of Amazon or Uber's Garrett Camp.
This is the 2-minute hate part of the video, by the way. These are the specific people you should hate, according to Ash Sarkar. But you see, I think you should hate these people for the immoral things they do, not just because they own a lot of money.
For guys who are literally some of the richest people on the planet, they don't pay their workers very much.
I don't care, Ash. You get paid depending upon how productive you are. If all you are doing is getting things out of a warehouse and packing them up, that is apparently about $15 worth per hour of productivity. This is how the labour market works, Ash. And the reason it's so low, though that is pretty high considering what they should be paid, the reason for this is because literally anyone can have that job. There is no previous qualifications needed. There is no previous skills you particularly need. All you need to be able to do is locate something, take it down, put it in a box with some bubble wrap. You're not just gonna get more because you happen to be working for Amazon, Ash. That is not how markets work. Idiot.
Apple has been linked to forced labour and sweatshops in the Chinese factories which produce the bulk of the company's iPhones.
Wow, I can't believe they go to a communist country to get cheap labour. You know, this country with a massive government like you want, Ash. You know this government that will look after its workers? Yeah, a communist one? Oh, sorry, this isn't real communism, is it?
In the past 10 years, there have been multiple suicides of assembly line workers, and the Foxconn corporate response was to install large safety nets outside its buildings to catch falling bodies.
Well, technically they wouldn't be dead yet, so calling them bodies I think is a bit dehumanising. But yes, this is pretty dire working conditions, and of course working conditions I'm against. I actually wouldn't be against a government having some sort of regulation or law to stop something like that. I'm not a crazy libertarian after all. But again, I don't know why you're blaming Apple for something that a different corporation has done, just because they buy the product from them. Because, as you say, Ash, I wouldn't be surprised if you own an iPhone. So if you are going to then blame Apple, who source their electronics from Foxconn, because of this evil that they do, I don't see why you're any better for owning an iPhone. But again, this is all just trying to rationalise her elephant. Ash here is trying to get her rider to get you to understand why her elephant hates billionaires. But really, when it comes to this argument, absolutely everyone in the world should be blamed. No one is free from this sin, if we are going by this logic, where I just blame Foxconn and China.
Workers at Amazon warehouses, paid about $10 an hour, have reported being forced to urinate in plastic bottles because they can't go to the toilet while on shift.
I do find it quite funny that Ash there implies that if they were paid more, pissing in a bottle would be more justifiable. But either way, yes, I do think you should have sensible break times to go to the loo if you need it. Yes, Ash, we do agree on this point. Although you point out that they are paid about $10 an hour, I think they are overpaid for that. And it has basically been put in by Amazon to virtue signal to people like you who still aren't happy about it.
Meanwhile, Uber has been fighting its own drivers' demand to be recognised as employees and be paid the minimum wage.
Yeah, and it's basically going to kill Uber. So now everyone's going to have a much higher fee when they pay to get an Uber. And quite a few of the Uber drivers are going to lose their jobs, because now that you have raised the bar to entry for that job, obviously some of the existing ones have got to go. And this is what I thought was great about the gig economy. It was mostly done by people who basically did it as a bit of a job on the side to earn basically a bit of pocket money. They enjoyed driving and they could make money off it. So what did they do? They became drivers for other people, and most of them will have been doing a master's degree in something or doing a part-time job elsewhere that paid more, or even full-time jobs. And a lot of them had families, and they said, yeah, their wife works as well, but I enjoyed doing this while there's nothing to do. Like, they were very positive about the way it worked, but now they can't do that anymore. Or some of them can't anyway, because they're going to get fired for this. And it's going to be blamed on performance, because we can't just be honest with people and say, oh, I don't like you, you don't fit well with the team, therefore you're fired or something like that. It has to be, your performance wasn't very good. Anyway.
One driver has said that unpaid waiting times force down his pay so much that he has to work 12 to 14-hour shifts just to break even.
You can get a better job than that then. One with a more reliable income. That's the part of the risk with Uber. That's part of the risk with the gig economy. And I mainly say this because I was in a position where I didn't feel like I was earning enough, but I was actually finding it hard to get another job. So I used to work 6-hour shifts in a supermarket, and then I do an unpaid part-time internship at a software house to get skills to get a better job. And guess what? About a year of doing that, after that, I found a job to get on a graduate scheme in software really easily. And don't get me wrong, that year was really hard, especially having to do YouTube at the same time. Because I have to say, I do love my hobbies. But it's part of the sacrifices we all make. I couldn't make as many YouTube videos because of that. Oh well, I don't make a big income there. So obviously it's one of the first things to get sacrificed. But Ash Sarkar probably thinks it's only fair if every single household has an infinity pool. And she probably thinks that's also a reasonable request, but my god, this is the problem with millennial socialism. They don't understand just how bad the state of nature is and how far we have actually come to be in a civilization where it's unthinkable. It's a weird type of civilizational privilege, but really, if we were all cavemen, most of us would all die because we would not be able to survive.
Becoming a billionaire isn't a reward of individual effort. It's not a prize for playing fair or working towards the public good.
She says all that based on a complete misunderstanding of how markets actually work, and pointing out that 2 companies have actually treated their workers terribly. Uber I do not count as treating their workers terribly, because I understand that minimum wage is a stupid law to have.
The societies which produce the most billionaires are the most unequal on the planet.
Oh my god, I don't care. Equality is such a stupid thing to go for. There has been no society on earth ever that has been equal. The reason for that is that it is an impossibility, Ash.
The UK produced 24 new billionaires, the single biggest jump for 33 years, during a pandemic which has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and increased unemployment to 1.7 million.
Yeah, well, obviously that's what a lockdown would do. You can't do business, Ash, so we couldn't get entrepreneurs in to make competition for these oligarch and monopolies that could afford to survive in it. Obviously that's going to make more billionaires, Ash. This was the issue with lockdown, which you wanted. Though to be fair, that wasn't for economic reasons, so there you go.
In the words of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, no one ever makes $1 billion, you take $1 billion.
Oh, that's the second person that understands absolutely nothing about economics. Most of the billions of dollars has not been taken from them. It has been invested with risk and the knowledge that some of those assets are going to increase in price with the risk that it may decrease in price. And if it decreases in price, it's going to go down dramatically. Now, whether you decide to call that earned or not, I don't care. All I know is that they did nothing immoral by doing that.
Billionaires are a symptom of a sick society which rewards those with the greatest capacity to leverage their power over as many people as possible and extract money from them.
I would love to know, Ash, exactly what money from me Jeff Bezos has extracted. I'd love to know from his Amazon workers what money has been extracted from them, given that they get paid by him. Well, not even by him, by his company, I should say. You haven't actually said who's been exploited here, apart from the people at Foxconn and Amazon. And even then, you were only implying that wages were the issue. The bigger issue was the way they were being treated at work, which is a completely different thing to being exploited and having money extracted from them. And you could probably make decent arguments about why billionaires have done bad things here, but she can't do it because all she could do is be emotional about things and turn it into decent rhetoric for people who don't understand these things.
The truth is, you're never going to be a billionaire. But even if you could, would you really want to?
I would not turn down £1 billion, Ash. That is a stupid question. But what I will say is that no, I probably wouldn't want to be, because it comes with a hell of a lot of stress, and it can ruin their lives in other ways. Just look at Bill and Melinda Gates. They split up recently. An awful lot of them seem to turn out to be nonces. Anyway, that is the end of the video. Once again, it turns out Ash Sarkar is a total moron. Anyway, there's been exciting news going on in the back end of the Haryan Gláeddyv channel. I won't give away too much here, but there is a little thing I'm helping out on called the Wellington Project. The link to the website and the Twitter profile are down below in the description. I would suggest you follow it, and if you are so inclined, to register for the mailing list so that you get news on when the Wellington Project is going to launch and other news like that. But anyway, that is everything I had for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.